Ezekiel Marsh found himself at the altar beside the largest woman he'd ever encountered, fully aware he'd just bartered his self-respect for a single head of cattle. Yet when Adelaide Quinn turned the bedroom key that evening, he understood he had no comprehension of what bargain he'd actually struck. The dry spell had shown no mercy. 90 days without precipitation, and Ezekiel's livestock had diminished to mere bones and hide before perishing individually. His property, formerly boasting 100 cattle, now contained nothing except parched soil and shattered aspirations. The bank document, still wadded in his jacket, served as a reminder that 30 days remained before forfeiting everything his predecessor had constructed. That was when Cornelius Slade had presented his proposition. "Wed my child, Adelaide, and I'll provide you the finest breeding animal in these parts," Slade had declared, his golden dental work catching the tavern's faint illumination. "She lacks physical beauty, but possesses a kind soul, and you require livestock more than personal dignity." Ezekiel had gazed into his vacant whiskey tumbler, sensing the stares of every patron in the establishment burning against his shoulders. Everyone understood his circumstances. Everyone knew his desperation made him consider any option. "Is she agreeable?" Ezekiel had inquired softly. "She's 26 and unwed. She understands her circumstances." Slade's laughter held cruelty. "Furthermore, what alternatives do either of you possess?" Standing within the modest timber chapel, Ezekiel glanced toward Adelaide. She donned a plain brown garment that pulled at the fabric, her black hair drawn back harshly. Her countenance was plump and gentle, yet her gaze contained something indiscernible. Not embarrassment, not acceptance, something more acute. The minister's proclamations merged together as Ezekiel contemplated the bovine awaiting in Slade's stable. A Holstein, plump and vigorous, valued beyond everything Ezekiel possessed collectively. It would serve as the cornerstone for reconstructing his livestock, the distinction between continuation and forfeiting the property bearing his lineage. "I accept," Adelaide declared decisively when asked, her tone more powerful than Ezekiel anticipated, his own voice trapped in his windpipe. "I accept." The band was inadequate for Adelaide's digit, but she pushed it on regardless. When the clergyman pronounced them wed, she gazed directly at Ezekiel for the initial time that day. That peculiar expression in her gaze remained, but now appeared almost entertained. The celebration was modest and uncomfortable. Slade's workers consumed food rapidly and departed. The handful of neighbors attending murmured amongst themselves, stealing glimpses at the improbable pair. Ezekiel automatically received felicitations that resembled sympathy more than joy. As twilight neared, Adelaide quietly collected her meager possessions. She owned merely a single threadbare travel bag and a leather-covered volume she gripped firmly. When departure time arrived for Ezekiel's property, she mounted the wagon independently, her mass causing the suspension to creak. The journey to his ranch remained quiet except for wheel sounds and distant coyote calls. Ezekiel continuously thought about the cow, about the opportunity for renewal, about the cost he'd just paid for survival. But when they reached his modest dwelling and Adelaide walked directly to the sleeping chamber, something in her bearing transformed. She moved with intention, not surrender. That's when she rotated the lock, confining them both inside, and Ezekiel realized this evening would differ completely from his expectations. Ezekiel stared at the secured entrance, his hand motionless on the knob. The cramped sleeping chamber felt like a snare now, with Adelaide positioned between him and the sole escape. The individual flame on the bedside table created dancing shadows across her features, rendering her expression incomprehensible. "What are you doing?" he asked, attempting to maintain voice stability. Adelaide didn't respond immediately. Instead, she approached the window and drew the fabric closed, eliminating the moonlight. When she faced him again, something in her posture had completely shifted. The compliant woman from the chapel had vanished. "Be seated," she commanded firmly. Ezekiel felt coldness travel down his backbone. "Adelaide, unlock that entrance immediately." "My identity isn't Adelaide." She opened her travel bag and retrieved a substantial roll of documents. "And I'm not Cornelius Slade's child." The statement struck Ezekiel like a physical impact. He collapsed onto the bed's edge, staring at her. "What?" "My actual name is Catherine Walsh. Adelaide Quinn succumbed to illness 2 years past." She unrolled the documents on the small table. Slade required someone to assume her role for this marriage. Someone desperate enough to perform the part. Ezekiel's thoughts raced. "That's impossible." "Why would you?" "Because Slade owes me something far more precious than cattle." Catherine's voice was freezing. "My father possessed the water privileges to Creek Canyon. Slade murdered him for them 3 years ago. Made it appear like a riding mishap." The room seemed to rotate around Ezekiel. "You're lying." "I possess the evidence right here." She tapped the documents. "Witnesses who observed Slade sabotage my father's saddle. Bank records showing he falsified the water rights transfer. Everything I need to destroy him." Ezekiel rose slowly, his legs unsteady. "Then why marry me? Why this pretense?" "Because Slade is suspicious. He maintains armed guards around him constantly. Never travels anywhere alone." Catherine moved closer, her eyes intense. "But tonight, thinking his problematic daughter is safely wed, he'll be celebrating at Murphy's Tavern, drinking and vulnerable. Adelaide was going to expose him. She discovered my father's murder and threatened to contact the territorial marshal." Catherine's voice softened slightly. "Slade had her poisoned, made it look like fever." Ezekiel felt nauseated. "And you think I'm going to help you kill him? I don't need your assistance killing him." Catherine reached into her travel bag again and produced a small glass container filled with clear liquid. "I need your help ensuring he pays for his actions." The sight of the container made Ezekiel's blood freeze. "Catherine, whatever you're planning." "Justice, Ezekiel. I'm planning justice." She tucked the container into her dress pocket. "Slade murdered 2 people and stole everything my family owned. Tonight he pays." Ezekiel moved toward the entrance again. "I won't be part of this insanity." "You already are." Catherine smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You're married to his daughter, remember? When they find his body tomorrow morning, you'll be the first person they suspect. After all, everyone knows how desperate you were." The trap was perfect, and Ezekiel finally understood why Catherine had looked so entertained during the ceremony. She hadn't been marrying him, she'd been framing him. But what she didn't know was that Ezekiel had secrets of his own. And when she unlocked that door to leave for Slade's murder, she was going to discover that her perfect plan had one fatal flaw. Ezekiel watched Catherine examine the small container one more time, her fingers steady despite the magnitude of what she was planning. She had no idea that he'd been expecting this moment for months. Not this exact scenario, but something like it. Something that would finally give him the chance to settle his own score with Cornelius Slade. "You're making a mistake," Ezekiel said quietly. "The only mistake I made was trusting that you'd understand." Catherine moved toward the door, key in hand. "Stay here. When they come asking questions tomorrow, tell them your wife went to visit her father one last time before starting her new life." "Catherine, wait." Ezekiel's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Before you go, there's something you should know about that container." She froze, her hand on the key. "What?" "It's not poison." Ezekiel sat back down on the bed, suddenly looking more relaxed than he had all evening. "It's tinted water with a bit of salt." The color drained from Catherine's face. "That's impossible." I purchased it from the medicine man in Tombstone. He guaranteed it would kill a man in minutes. The medicine man works for me. Ezekiel smiled for the first time since the ceremony. Has for 6 months now. Ever since I started tracking down everyone who wanted Slade dead. Catherine's hand trembled as she pulled the container from her pocket, staring at it in disbelief. You've been watching me. You're not the only one Slade destroyed, Catherine. The difference is I've been patient. I've been planning. Ezekiel stood up slowly. That cow he gave me as your dowry? It belonged to my family before the drought. Slade bought my debt from the bank and foreclosed early, then had his men steal my cattle in the night. Then why stop me? Why not let me kill him? Because hanging him would be too quick. Ezekiel walked to the window and looked out toward town. I want him to lose everything slowly, the way he made us lose everything. His land, his cattle, his reputation. I want him to die a broken man. Catherine clutched the useless container, her perfect plan crumbling around her. The papers, the witnesses, they're real. I know. I've been collecting evidence against Slade for months. Your father's murder was just one of many crimes. Ezekiel turned back to her. The territorial marshal is already on his way. Should arrive tomorrow morning with federal warrants. You used me, Catherine whispered. We used each other. The difference is my plan doesn't end with either of us swinging from a rope. Ezekiel unlocked the door. Slade's reign ends tomorrow, but it ends legally. Catherine sank into the chair, the weight of her failed revenge crushing down on her. But as Ezekiel opened the door, the sound of horses approaching fast made them both freeze. They're coming for us, Catherine breathed. Ezekiel's confidence vanished as he recognized the riders. Slade's men, armed and riding hard toward the cabin. Someone had betrayed them both, and now their carefully laid plans meant nothing. Tonight wasn't going to end with justice or revenge. Tonight was going to end with blood. The thunder of hooves grew louder as Ezekiel extinguished the candle, plunging the bedroom into darkness. Through the window, he could see torches bobbing in the distance, at least 6 riders coming fast. Catherine grabbed his arm, her breath shallow with panic. How did they know? Ezekiel's mind raced through the possibilities. Someone had told Slade about Catherine's real identity, about the fake marriage, about everything. But who? The medicine man was loyal, bought and paid for. The few people who knew about his investigation were trustworthy. The preacher, Ezekiel breathed. Slade owns him. Catherine's grip tightened. What do we do? The evidence. It's hidden under the kitchen floorboards. Ezekiel grabbed his rifle from beside the bed. You take the evidence and hide. No matter what happens, don't come out until morning. What about you? I'm going to give them what they came for. Ezekiel checked his rifle, knowing he had 6 shots against 6 men. Not good odds, but he'd faced worse during the war. They want to fight, they'll get one. Catherine clutched the papers to her chest. Ezekiel, those men will kill you. Maybe, but if I run now, Slade wins everything. Your father stays dead and unavenged. My family's land stays stolen. Adelaide's murder goes unpunished. He looked at her in the darkness. I won't let that happen. The horses were close enough now that they could hear Slade's voice shouting orders. Catherine kissed Ezekiel's cheek quickly, then slipped out of the bedroom toward the kitchen. Ezekiel waited until he heard the cellar door close before moving to the front window. Slade sat on his horse in the yard, torch held high, his face twisted with rage. 5 armed men flanked him, rifles ready. In the flickering light, Ezekiel could see that one of them was the territorial marshal himself, the man who was supposed to arrest Slade tomorrow morning. Ezekiel Marsh. Slade's voice boomed across the yard. I know what you've been planning. Come out now, and we might let you live long enough to stand trial. Ezekiel stepped onto his porch, rifle lowered but ready. Evening, Cornelius. Congratulations on the wedding. Your daughter's quite something. Slade's laugh was ugly. That fat cow isn't my daughter and you know it. Where's Catherine Walsh? Never heard of her. Ezekiel kept his voice steady. My wife Adelaide went to bed early. Long day, you understand? Stop playing games. The marshal spurred his horse forward, badge glinting in the torchlight. We know Catherine Walsh killed the real Adelaide Quinn 2 years ago. We know she's been planning to murder Mr. Slade, and we know you've been helping her. The betrayal hit Ezekiel like a physical blow. The marshal wasn't coming to arrest Slade, he was working with him. Every piece of evidence Ezekiel had gathered, every witness he'd found, every careful plan he'd made over the past 6 months had been reported directly to the man he was trying to destroy. You're all on his payroll, Ezekiel said quietly. Smart man. Slade dismounted, pulling his own rifle. Did you really think you could outsmart me? I've owned this territory for 20 years. I know about every move before it's made. But as Slade stepped closer, confident in his victory, he made the same mistake he'd made with Catherine's father. He underestimated the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. Ezekiel raised his rifle as Slade approached, but he wasn't aiming at the man who'd destroyed his life. Instead, he pointed the barrel directly at the torch in Slade's hand. One shot and the yard would plunge into darkness, giving him the advantage he needed. You made one mistake, Cornelius, Ezekiel said, finger on the trigger. What's that? You assumed I was planning to fight fair. Ezekiel fired, and the torch exploded in a shower of sparks. The burning oil splattered across Slade's shirt, sending him stumbling backward, beating at the flames. In the chaos and darkness, Ezekiel dove behind the water trough. The corrupt marshal shouted orders, but before anyone could react, the thunder of approaching horses filled the air. Different horses. Federal horses. The real territorial marshal arrived with 6 federal deputies, their badges gleaming in the moonlight. Drop your weapons, Marshal Hayes commanded, his voice carrying absolute authority. This is a federal investigation. The corrupt marshal who'd been working with Slade tried to run, but Catherine stepped out of the cabin holding a lantern and a thick bundle of papers. She'd never hidden in the cellar. Instead, she'd been signaling the real federal agents with the lantern from the kitchen window. Marshal Hayes, Catherine called out clearly, I have documented evidence of murder, theft, and corruption involving Cornelius Slade and Marshal Warren. Slade's men threw down their rifles immediately, realizing they'd been caught in a federal trap. The corrupt Marshal Warren reached for his gun, but Ezekiel was faster. His shot hit Warren's hand, sending the weapon flying into the darkness. Catherine Walsh has been working with federal investigators for 3 months, Marshal Hayes announced as his deputies surrounded Slade's men. Every conversation, every bribe, every threat has been documented. Slade, still smoldering from the burning oil, looked between Catherine and Ezekiel with dawning horror. This was all planned. The marriage was real, Catherine said, walking to stand beside Ezekiel. But Adelaide Quinn was my sister, not Slade's daughter. When she discovered his crimes and threatened to expose him, he had her poisoned. I've been gathering evidence ever since. Ezekiel stared at her. Your sister? Adelaide was trying to help your family retain the water rights when she uncovered Slade's forgeries. She died protecting people she'd never met. Catherine's voice was steady, but tears ran down her cheeks. Tonight was justice for her, for your father, for everyone he destroyed. Marshal Hayes slapped shackles on Slade's wrists. Cornelius Slade, you're under arrest for murder, fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Marshal Warren, you're under arrest for corruption and conspiracy to commit murder. As the federal deputies led the prisoners away, Ezekiel and Catherine stood together in the yard. The ranch was still failing, the drought wasn't over, and they were still married to each other under false pretenses. But Slade's reign of terror was finished. "What happens now?" Ezekiel asked. Catherine smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "Now we rebuild together, the way Adelaide wanted." Ezekiel looked at the woman who'd married him for revenge and discovered something better. Sometimes the greatest treasures come from the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.